Hello, hello, hello. It's Lily Enrique here from Parent Support Network, coming in today with Parent Support Network TV episode.
Hello, it's
Whoops,
Lily
we have that
here
echo
from
back
Parent
again.
Support Network, coming in today with
Parent Support Network episode. What are we up to? I've lost track. I think we're up to episode, goodness me, I've forgotten. Let me quickly check. Doesn't really matter, does it? Episode 40. Here from Parents 45, episode 45. So I'm in a little bit of a fluster today because I've got to get somebody to the airport very shortly. So today I wanted to talk about, are you your child's biggest supporter and fan? And I can remember when we were coaching with our parenting coach, Frank, back years ago when our now 29-year-old son was 14. And he talked to us about being your child's biggest supporter and fan. And I'm like, of course, we're our children's biggest supporter and their number one fan. And he's like, really? Do you support them under every condition unconditionally? Or is there unconditional, or is there conditional points to your love and to your support for them? And it actually really got us thinking because, back in those days, even though we were parenting with the very best of intentions, as I've talked about before, we were doing a lot of upside down parenting, giving more attention, relationship and connection to the things he was doing wrong. So we weren't necessarily his biggest supporters and fans. We were quick to judge, to come in and talk about all the things that he wasn't doing right, as opposed to, okay, let's talk about this in a positive and supportive way. So sometimes we think we're our children's biggest supporters and fans. And whilst I hope we are their biggest supporters and fans, sometimes the kids are not getting that message. And sometimes the kids are getting mixed messages. So one day we could come in with a positive attitude and the kids could go, oh, wow, mum and or dad, they're really being my biggest supporter and fan today. They're listening. They're taking in my perspective and point of view. They're allowing me to explain why I did what I did or why I think what I thought without them arguing or judging or putting their perspective or point of view across. And then other days we might come in with so much judgment, so much, okay, it's my way or the highway type of thing. And the kids are like, well, where are they at? Are they really my biggest supporters and fans? And if you remember me telling you that story about when we launched the Revolting Child book, and I know I've told this story 100 times and you're probably, Lillian, I'm sick of hearing this story. But when we did that book launch for the Revolting Child book, which was my third book, and I'm actually going to share something from my fourth book today. But when my son actually said when he saw the changes that he was seeing in our relationships were because when he saw the effort that his mum and dad were making to be the best parents they could be, to be his biggest supporters and his number one fan, he wanted to be the best son he could be. He wanted to be our biggest supporter and our number one fan. So it actually becomes like the law of reciprocity, right? So what you give, you get back again. So if you treat your children with total love and support, no matter what's happening. I'm actually going to, I wrote this book, If You Want Kids to Cooperate, Just Ask, in 2010. And it's made up of 36 different parenting tips. And it's done alphabetically. And parenting tip number 27 is show your children you are their biggest supporter and their number one fan. Now, this was before I learned about the Nurtured Heart approach. So I'm going to test myself. I haven't really read this chapter before jumping on today. It's just a pretty short one. It'll only take a couple of minutes, but I'm going to read it just off the cuff to see how on track I was before the Nurtured Heart approach with, what my thoughts were about parenting. And this would have come from our coaching and mentoring with Frank. So I wrote book number 3, The Revolting Child, A Blessing in Disguise, directly after meeting and coaching with Frank. And then this was the 4th book out of 6. So this book came after that. So a lot of the things that I talked about in this book were things that Frank taught us. So let's see what I say about show your children you are their biggest supporter and their number one fan. So regardless of what our children say, do, or how they act, we have to show them that we love them unconditionally and will not judge them or their actions. Easier said than done sometimes, isn't it? If our children know we will not judge them, they will be more likely to confide in us and tell us what's happening in their lives, as they will not fear being judged, criticised, or yelled at. And sometimes we say to our kids, you can tell us anything, and then they tell us, and then we yell at them and judge them, right? So regardless of who else is putting them down, we have to be their rock, the constant that will always be there to love and support them through any challenge. It's so important for our children to see us, their parents, as their number one fan, no matter what is going on in your lives, no matter how much your child appears to be out of alignment with your thinking, no matter how much grief your child is currently giving you, no matter how much trouble they are getting into, no matter how they treat or speak to you, no matter how much others are telling you they are this or that, and how often do we listen to what other people say, right? You must still be their number one fan. And I've got a picture of, the flag, and yeah, you're my number one fan. It's so important that we show our children that we always love them and will support them unconditionally, that we will always be there to help them no matter what. Yes, you've heard this before and you'll hear it again. If they feel that total love and unconditional support, they will be far more likely to open up to you and let you know what's happening in their lives, at school, with peers, with their feelings and thoughts. And especially as we get into those kind of pre-teen, teen years as well. I know that when Caleb was revolting big time, when he was rude, insolent, aggressive, defiant, disrespectful, and inconsiderate, it was a challenge sometimes to be his number one fan. But as we put our thoughts and feelings aside just a bit and looked at things from Caleb's perspective, we could see he was lost and hurting and needed us more than ever. When you think about it, isn't it when someone is hurting that they need us more than ever? Isn't this when our children know how much of a challenge they've been, that they need someone that is totally on their side? Regardless of their age, so regardless of whether they're 5, 15 or 25, our children need to feel our support and that we are batting for them. We have to remain strong and supportive throughout all challenges. Easier said than done, I know. But the bigger the challenge, the more support they will need. Any challenge can be rectified if you work as a team with your child. Work against them, and the likelihood is the challenge will escalate. They will then look to others for support. Did you know that this is how and why lots of kids get involved in gangs and various groups? And this is something that Frank did teach us. When children or teens don't feel like they belong to a family unit at home, they go seeking that support and sense of belonging elsewhere. They continue looking for somewhere to belong, for someone or something that will make them feel important, even if it is a negative influence. Gang members often look for vulnerable kids that want to feel wanted and respected. They can manipulate our children by offering them this sense of belonging, offering them respect, and via the same gaining of cooperation we talked about earlier, can get our kids to agree to anything. And, use your imagination there. It does happen, right? So do you want to be their number one fan or someone else that may not even have honourable intentions? That's really some good food for thought there. So that's what I wrote in 2010. And I think that pretty much still aligns with my thinking and with what I teach with Nurtured Heart Approach, because the whole, purpose of Nurtured Heart Approach is to really build our children's what we call inner wealth. So their sense of who they are as a person. So their self-esteem, their self-worth, their self-love, their self-respect, how they view themselves in this world. And that's what we're constantly wanting to build, that inner wealth. We also use the terminology portfolio because it's almost like, we're helping them to build this portfolio that they're carrying around with them. And if you think about, an artist, for example, who has a portfolio of all of their best works, they're possibly not going to put, to take to a perspective art gallery, for example, they're not going to put their work in there that they didn't like or was, or wasn't good or just scribble. They're going to put their best things into their portfolio. So what we want to do as our children's number one supporters, biggest supporters and number one fan, is to help build all the things that they want and need to put into their portfolio. So as they mature from childhood to, preteen to teen, adolescence, into early childhood and early adulthood, and then go off into, their own lives, eventually, getting their own employment or having their own businesses, finding their own partners, perhaps getting married, having children, who knows. We want that portfolio to be filled with the things that they need to live a happy and healthy life. Now, that they could be different for different people, but most people would say they want in their child's portfolio that their children are kind, honourable, respectful, resilient, cooperative perhaps, although we want them to have a mind of their own as well, keen thinkers, generous people, people who like to help people, people who are respectful, who show respect to other people. We want them to have self-confidence. We want them to be able to attract the job or the business that they want, that, something that fills their heart, something that they're passionate about. We want them to be able to attract the right partner who is loving and kind and, is a good fit for them, because so many kids these days are filling their portfolios as they're growing up with things like, I'm not good enough, or maybe even I'm broken. Sometimes kids who are put on medication and stuff, who feels like there's something wrong with them, they could be broken, or they're constantly being told they're not good enough, or they're always in trouble and they feel like, oh, I just can't get things right. I can't get things right at home. I can't get things right at school. They don't feel like they have their biggest supporter or number one fan. And sometimes that biggest supporter and number one fan might not be a parent. It could be an educator. So as an educator, you could play a huge part, or even as a grandparent or an aunt or auntie or uncle, or a sporting coach even, or a close family member. You can still be a child's biggest supporter and number one fan, even if you're not the parents, because sometimes for various reasons, the parents aren't in a position, or they're not doing well enough themselves to be their own number one supporter and fan, let alone somebody else's. And that actually brings me to a really good point. And it's something that we were discussing. I was discussing with one of my clients this morning in a coaching call, is that we actually have to be our own biggest supporter and fan as well. Because if we're working on being the best parent that we can be, really, for example, implementing the Nurtured Heart approach, or implementing positive parenting techniques and ways of communicating and relationshiping, if we feel pretty crap about ourselves as a human, as a person, as a man, a woman, a parent, as somebody in the workforce, a business owner, a brother or sister or a son or a daughter, if we don't feel good about who we are, if we can't regulate our feelings and the way that we interact and communicate with people, it's going to be pretty challenging, right, to implement and be our children's biggest supporters and fans. So my suggestion would be, if you're not feeling in a place right now where you can be your child's biggest supporter and number one fan, work on yourself simultaneously, or maybe work on yourself first, so that you can be feeling like that you're your own biggest supporter and number one fan. Because when you feel better about you, you're certainly going to be able to interact and relationship with others, and particularly those people who are closest to us, like our kids and our partners, etc., in a really positive and uplifting way. So are you your children's biggest supporter and fan? And I think the key there was about it being unconditional, not placing condition on, today I'm your biggest supporter and number one fan, but tomorrow I'm not going to be, because of, or yesterday I was your biggest supporter and fan, but today because you're mucking up, or today because you didn't listen, or today because you did that thing that you knew you shouldn't have done, I'm not your biggest supporter and fan. I know that, and once again, I've told this story many times, but I remember when our son was 15 and he had yet another big issue at home. And you've probably heard this story before if you've listened to any of my stuff, but just in case you haven't, he had a really, really tough day at school and he ran away from school. Anyway, the long and short of it was that he came home, instead of me being his biggest supporter and number one fan, I went straight into upside down parenting. Why did you do that again? You know, why are you always getting into trouble at school? What have you done today? The teachers have said you're going to be suspended for 20 days. What have you done? Why did you run off? Rah, 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 rah. You're grounded. You're in trouble. You know, like I just went straight into this upside down parenting. I wasn't being his biggest supporter and fan. And because he didn't feel this, and this, if I could isolate one day where I can remember feeling the worst as a parent, it's this day. Because that 15-year-old son, boy, child, my son, he was seeking me. He came home, even though he'd run away from school, he came home, walked into the front door, hoping that his mum, who should be his biggest supporter and fan, would be there with open arms to say, how was your day? Even like I got a call from the school. I heard you've had a tough day. Tell me about it from your perspective, and just listened and just let him share from his perspective. But no, I didn't do that, right? I went off like a crazy woman, you know, yelling and screaming and why, you know, I'm sick of these calls from the school and why can't you get it right? And how do you think he felt? Do you think in that moment he felt like he had a parent who was his biggest supporter and fan? He did not. And I didn't feel good. He ran off, and obviously I couldn't do anything about it. He ran off, and then if you've heard the story before, several hours later, we found him in a drunken stupor in the gutter, and it really pretty much took him 2 days to sober up. Luckily, in the meantime, we did some mentoring with our coach. So normally I particularly would have gone into that upside down parenting again, you know, as he sobered up. What did you take? Why did you take it? What a stupid thing to do. You could have this, you could have that. You could have got run over by a car in that gutter. You could have got thrown into jail. You know, you could have killed yourself. Like I could have gone into all that negativity of what could have happened if this, that could have happened, all the negative stuff. But our parenting coach taught us in that moment that we more than ever had to be his biggest supporter and number one fan. And that our role in that moment, as he was coming out of that situation, was just to be there for him, to let him know that we were there, to love him no matter what, no matter that he mucked up, no matter what he'd done, what he'd taken, what happened at school, the decisions he made later, they didn't matter, because we are here to help and support you in any way that we can. So as he came out of that, instead of, he was probably thinking, oh boy, I'm in deep trouble. I'm going to be like yelled at and screamed at, and I'm going to be, grounded, and, all sorts of stuff's going to happen. When my husband and I took a different perspective and we became his number one supporter and fan and followed our parenting coach's directions, that's when I believe the real healing started, because we were pretty new to coaching with Frank at this stage, and I was still carrying a lot of my upside down parenting mindset at that stage. So don't beat yourself up. I talk to some of my clients sometimes who are like, oh, I keep reverting back to my negative parent, my negative parenting, my yelling, my screaming, my threatening, etc. And it takes time. When we've for years and years and years and years parented or communicated or were parented by our parents in a certain way, it takes time to change those habits. So my husband and I made a real commitment to do that. And even though it was really hard, especially in that situation, because I just wanted to say, what did you do? Why did you do it? How stupid. Look at you. You're so drunk you don't even know your name. And that was true. He didn't even know who he was. So, but when we didn't judge him, when we were just there as his biggest supporter and fan, that really was the beginning of our healing, because he saw then that we were making some changes, you know, that we were trying to see things from his perspective and his point of view. And even though he knew he'd mucked up big time, he didn't need us to remind him of that, did he? We had to look for the things that we could say to him that would make him feel better about who he is as a person, rather than reinforcing the fact that he already felt like a failure and an idiot and, excuse me, stupid, irresponsible, etc., for doing the things that he did. He knew he'd done all of that. He didn't need us to remind him. And how often as parents, when kids muck up, do we go over and over and over the mistake they made, how stupid it was, how irresponsible it was? Do you know what could have happened if you whatever, you know, like they already know that, right? They're already feeling bad about that. So what's the point? What's the advantage in continuing to make them feel worse about what they've done? We want to encourage them to make better choices next time, but to know that regardless, no matter what they've done, no matter how traumatic it might be for us as parents to deal with, that we are here to support you, to help you get through this, to help you maybe make better choices next time. If you want our guidance, don't force that upon them if they seek it, if they want it, which they probably will if you treat them in a certain way. So that's my message for today. I hope that was of some value to you. Are you your children's biggest supporter and fan? I'd like you to ponder that and maybe just think about how differently maybe do you communicate in relationship with your kids when things are going well, as opposed to when kids are perhaps mucking up or breaking rules or fighting with their sibling or not listening or not getting chores done or refusing to do their homework or have a shower or turn off their phone or whatever's going on, right? It all depends on how, what are you giving energy to in that moment? Are you looking for things that you can give positive energy towards to help them have some success, or are you just focusing on the things they're doing wrong? So parents, be your children's biggest supporters and their number one fans, and try and do it on a daily and consistent basis. That's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm off to take my son to the airport. So have a great day. Lillian Reiki, parenting strategist from Parent Support Network, equipping parents to enjoy happy and healthy children and relationships on purpose. Bye for now.